thank you for joining us. It's a conversation that we call Live with Faye on YouTube. We have something very interesting developing in our country, the use of Twitter. Apart from the fact that Rihana and Meena Harris and Greta Thunberg Greta Thunberg, I beg your pardon, have made statements about the farmer protests. The other thing that I think that we should discuss is the fact that Twitter has received a notice from the government of India for reinstating the accounts that were taken down on Monday. And we understand from newspaper reports that the government has issued a notice to Twitter to comply with its order and remove those accounts and content related to what was called farmer genocide and content with that hashtag designed to inflame passions. Now, there's a report in the Indian Express. Now, the Indian Express quotes sources from the government to say that Twitter had a meeting with the government of India talking about the fact that it unblocked the 250 accounts that the government had asked them to block. And the Indian Express quotes their source saying, yes, Twitter tried to push back against the order, but we have not changed anything. You can't write that the PM is carrying out genocide and then get away with it. Twitter needs to implement this. People can't go around insulting the Prime Minister of the land like this, end quote, said a government source to the Indian Express. Lots of questions come up. What laws are the government using? Do the laws state that the government can ask Twitter to take down whatever they want? The Indian Express also says that the government has said Twitter cannot unilaterally decide as an appellate authority over the satisfaction of its own authorities, the potential impact. So basically, what the government is saying is that Twitter cannot make these decisions. The government will make these decisions. Twitter has to follow those instructions. Where does that leave citizens? Is it true that Twitter can take down anyone's account on government notice without Twitter actually applying any of its own discretion? These are the questions that we're asking, besides questions that have also come out on our Discord server, which we'll try and take through this conversation. Nikhil Pahwa joins us right now. Nikhil Pahwa is a journalist who runs a very cool, very proficient website called Medianama. You guys should go check it out. Largely focusing on tech and matters of privacy and freedoms on the internet. It becomes more and more important with every passing day. Nikhil, thank you for giving us time. I know that you've spent some time looking at this.
Yeah.
The Indian Express report quotes Section 69A of the IT Act. What does that section say? And is it true it gives the government this power?
Well, Faye, just privately or sort of informally, we call Section 69A as secret blocking orders. So these are orders that are issued by the government of India to intermediaries, platforms like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, it could even be sent to your ISP. And these orders have to be kept secret, and they're meant for blocking particular links or particular sites that the government of India might assess violate or rather in consonance with restrictions on free speech in India. So something that could be impacting public order, something that could be in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security, all of that stuff. Yeah.
I could read it out for a second. It allows the government to block public access to information from a computer in interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, preventing incitement to commission of any cognizable offense relating to the above. Now, these are the same exclusions or exceptions that the Constitution lists when it comes to freedom of speech.
Exactly. Now these are very broad heads, right? So somewhere when accounts are being blocked or handles are being blocked or specific tweets or pages are being blocked, the government still has to show a rational nexus between why they're blocking something and how it falls within this particular framework. So unfortunately, when they take a decision, because of the secrecy of the order, we don't know whether their decision is right or wrong. We can't question it because we don't know. There's complete blackout in terms of they're not available under RTI. No one has access to these orders except those who have been served with the orders and the government officials themselves.
Why are they not available under RTI?
Because the parliament in its wisdom decided that this can be secret. And especially when it comes to terrorist activity or terrorist
Okay.
propaganda, those information, like it's easy to put an extreme threshold like terrorist activity and create laws that can otherwise be used to censor free speech, which is why I'm opposed to the idea of creating laws based on exceptional situations. You need to have a very high threshold to be able to take such a to impose such restrictions. And just remember that when the IT Act was passed in 2008, um, it had been made significantly more draconian in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks in Mumbai. And so passions were high. We wanted to do more to protect people. We wanted to restrict access using technology, because at that point in time, BlackBerry phones had been used by terrorists to communicate with each other. So there was this thing that we have to do more. And in those circumstances, whenever there is a response to an extreme situation like a terrorist attack, usually the laws that get created lead to extreme curtailment of our freedoms, which is what also happened with 66A, which was declared unconstitutional in 2015 by the Supreme Court
Yeah.
after a very hard fought fight.
So let's also talk about the guys on the other side of the table, right, which is Twitter. And this entire conversation came up when Twitter banned Donald Trump. So there were two things that happened. On one hand, there was a point of view that Twitter actually waited until they were absolutely sure that Trump had lost the election and there was no coming back from that. And that's when they decided to action the ban. The other side of the argument was that here was a social media giant in combination with two others who had the ability to shut off access to the head of state, like someone who was heading a country, and a very powerful country. So between these three social media giants, they have more power than we are really willing to acknowledge. So obviously Twitter can do whatever it wants in its platform, but does it need to be transparent as to why? Should Twitter be sharing that order that they got from the government? Because they haven't. They've just sort of told us what's in it.
So look, when it came to Twitter banning Trump, and even when it came to Facebook banning Trump, I think the action was taken too little too late. Trump clearly deserved it. He'd been feeding hate for a very long time. And given that this is a private platform, they had every right to ban them. But the problem is that most platforms don't take risks when the other side has more power than them. And that's what Trump had until he lost the election, when public support had waned or was not with him. So we cannot expect platforms to be necessarily rational or consistent because they're private platforms. But we also have a challenge that these platforms are private entities which perform a public function. So we expect transparency from them. In this instance, you can't expect transparency because under the rules to Section 69A, the orders have to be kept secret. That's why I call them secret blocking orders. So Twitter can't disclose them, the government doesn't disclose them, and so therefore we don't know what's going on. There is no public availability of the order or even the letter that Meti sent to Twitter.
Okay, I'm also looking at, again, that Indian Express article, which quotes a portion of the notice that Twitter has now received, which effectively threatens action against Twitter if they don't follow the rules, right? They say the direction to block the hashtag has been found to be instigating people and committing a cognizable offense. It may be noted that the impracticability or disproportionality of the said measure cannot be decided by Twitter, which is an intermediary bound by the orders of the central government. It may be further noted that banning of the said hashtag and the accompanied by the content attached by the users is using the same. It goes on, but effectively, the short question here is...
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. How is a hashtag leading to a public order situation? A hashtag doesn't have a statement attached to it, right? So someone can be using that particular hashtag in order to counter it. Someone could be using that hashtag to basically report on how people are protesting that hashtag, or someone who's disagreeing with it. A hashtag has no meaning of its own. It can be a phrase that's used to connect various tweets together so that you can see what everyone's saying, whether it's for or against. So blocking a hashtag, saying that a hashtag is leading to public order, means that you're also censoring legitimate speech, which could potentially be countering it. Today, I mean, if you go to YouTube and search for that particular hashtag, which was, I think, Modi planning genocide, farmer genocide, you will find that an NDTV video pops up which discusses the issue. How is that in any way causing a genocide, in any way violating public order or creating a public order situation? There is no real nexus between a hashtag and public order. So look, Meti hasn't, from whatever I've read so far, someone at Meti has overreacted, or there's been pressure on them to react in this manner. And frankly, if this were to go to court, and if you look at all that's related to that hashtag, it won't meet the proportionality standard. It's disproportionate to ban all speech instead of specific instances of speech that are actually impacting public order. And then even there, you have to define a rational nexus between that particular tweet and that hashtag and public order. Now, how many? Twitter restored the accounts on the 1st, I think, right?
Yes.
It's been a couple of days. Has that hashtag or those tweets led to any public order issue? They haven't. There is supposed to be a review meeting which is supposed to check whether there's a need for that block to remain or not. There has been no public order issue because of the hashtag or because of those tweets. There is no way that the government can actually justify banning it now. But somebody's ego is hurt. Someone's order was not followed. And so they are now following it up, threatening Twitter representatives with court cases. And this is more like an ego issue from what I can see, not a rational response from the government.
That was going to be my next question, right? At the bottom of this whole thing, if you wade through the word salad in this notice, it finally says, it needs to be mentioned that 69A provided specific consequences on the case of non-compliance of directions issued. So they're threatening action. Now, what action can the government of India, if they decide to, take against an organization like Twitter?
So the section says that they shall be punished with an imprisonment for a term which may extend to 7 years and also be liable to fine. And so representatives of Twitter are at risk right now. And frankly, given that this order doesn't seem to be constitutional and it should be challenged, I think there is a great deal of risk that they have taken, but it's brave of them to have taken that risk in this situation to basically push back against a censorship of free speech, which could potentially be deemed illegal in court.
So, there is another side, another thing that has played out over the last 12 hours, really. When Rihana, the pop icon, came out and tweeted about the farm protest, she actually, if we consider it, has not even said anything. She said, why aren't we talking about this? What has followed is the most despicable kind of slut shaming, racial slurs, using the N-word, calling for her to be beaten, calling for domestic abuse. But none of that in any way constitutes to hate speech that the government seems to be offended by.
Well, I think it's not just the government. Twitter also should be offended by that. Twitter should be censoring that. I mean, if you look at the way things happen on Twitter, and this is Twitter at fault over many years, women, and especially women journalists and women icons, have been subject to the most vile kind of commentary on Twitter in particular. And they have not acted fast enough. They have not acted consistently enough. And I think Twitter needs to get its act together. And I've been saying this for years on this account. The government, frankly, couldn't care less because it doesn't meet with the narrative. It probably supports their pushback against anything that anyone is saying about the farmer protest that is not pro-government right now. So they're going to be selective in their action in this case. And the conversations around this government have typically been they've had whataboutery about them. And so you can always ask, what about this? What about that? I mean, why isn't the government acting over here? We don't know. Why haven't they acted against so much of hate speech on Twitter? We don't know. But when it comes to the government or a government policy being criticized, they want to act very quickly because it impacts them. So instead of protecting citizens, the government is protecting itself. That's what's going on.
Nikhil, let's talk about this 69E and the manner in which it's being used. A lot of, independent journalists, entrepreneurs like yourself, and I do too, we use social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, to actually communicate with our audiences. These are our platforms, technically.
Yeah.
Now, if, as per this law, the government can shut down whoever it wants to by sending a notice, tomorrow it could shut down any of the people who are running businesses right now. It could shut down journalists. It could, as it has done with the Caravan, it could just effectively, take people off the air. It could shut down businesses. Is that the truth of what we're looking at?
I think so, and that's particularly because of the way 69A has been designed. So a government entity issues an order, and then a government committee reviews the order. So the government reviews the government. And in that case, I'm not sure whether we can really rely on them to be rational and to hold another government official necessarily to account. So if they are saying that something is impacting public order or something is impacting the sovereignty of the country, will another government body or a government committee necessarily disagree with them? We don't know, but it's probably a case that they might not. And so, it's like the government proposes and the government disposes. There's no third party scrutiny of this because there is no transparency. So I really, really hope that someone, maybe the Caravan, maybe Sanjukta Basu, maybe anyone whose account has been impacted, maybe Twitter itself, goes to court, and this eventually goes up to the Supreme Court so that this draconian law can be addressed. And we failed to do it in 2015 because the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, said that there are enough checks and balances in place. What is very clear to us here is that there aren't sufficient safeguards in place, that there aren't sufficient checks and balances, and you really can't rely on the government to police itself.
Sohaib says, what's the worst that the Indian government can do if Twitter fails to comply? You said that, representatives of Twitter in India could be arrested.
Yes, representatives could be arrested. Additionally, I don't know, because they could probably also issue orders to ISPs to block Twitter in India. That's a possibility. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but that's always a possibility.
It'll be interesting because the government uses Twitter quite extensively themselves to replace journalists. So if they block Twitter, a lot of their own work will actually come to a grinding halt. Now, let's assume, for argument's sake, Twitter does comply and takes down these 250 accounts and pieces of content that they've been asked to. These guys will stay off until they approach the courts and ask for a reversal, right? And we don't know how long that will take.
Or until a committee meets again to decide whether the sufficient punishment has been meted out to these handles and reinstates them.
And this is the committee made up entirely of government officials?
This committee, as far as I understand, is made up entirely of government officials. I could be mistaken, but my understanding is that it is entirely made of government officials. I want to just remind everyone of one other thing. Section 69 is very interesting because it was the same section of the IT Act that was used to block Chinese apps back in August last year, and I think in September as well. The same one, right? Remember, at that point in time, the government of India issued a press release highlighting the fact that they've issued the blocks, highlighting why they've issued the blocks, and putting out a list of what all they have gotten blocked. They publicized a Section 69 order, and I'd said then, I have never seen the government actually go public with a Section 69 order and its details before. So they are transparent when it serves a political purpose for them, to showcase that they're pushing back against the Chinese, but they're completely opaque when it comes to something that's impacting the citizens of our country and that they want to be secretive about. If they can be public about the blocking of Chinese apps, I want to ask the government, why can't they be public about blocking these? If someone's done wrong, let it be open to public scrutiny. Just the way the ban on the Chinese apps was open to public scrutiny. They got support for it then. They might get support for it here. What are they afraid of?
And really, it's the lack of transparency here that is the problem. It's not the government action. It's because we not only do we have as democratic citizens no way of finding out. There's no RTI. It's very possible that even in courts, the government might argue that this is sensitive information.
Yeah, and there is another aspect to look at here. Accounts have been blocked, and a hashtag has been blocked, not specific individual tweets, right? And that is a disproportionate act of censorship. Something I might say might be illegal or violating the law, and in that case, what I have said deserves to be censored, right? But does that mean that everything I say deserves to be censored? Does my account need to be disabled and everything be censored for that, towards that end? That is disproportionate. And so to my mind, it fails the rationale where the Supreme Court had given in 2015 about why this order is legal. I don't think the Supreme Court envisaged entire accounts being blocked over here. And just remember, last year, Akar Patel's account was also blocked and then reinstated with no reasoning given.
Nikhil, other than obviously this one particular case, what do you think the larger motive is here? Could it be a warning shot being fired in the air for all journalist news organizations, anyone who's commenting right now saying, this is the kind of power we have?
Well, it's a demonstration of power very clearly, and there have been demonstrations of power in the past. But I don't know what the thought process is. I don't know what the motive is. At times, the government has access to more information than you and I do, but that doesn't necessarily justify them taking such actions. I don't know how, for example, this might lead to a public order issue. I don't know how, for example, the Caravan putting out a tweet which through reportage provides a counter narrative to the government's claim about a farmer being shot versus a farmer having an accident. A counter narrative lead to a case of sedition against the publication and its owners, right? And against journalists. If there is proof, why not showcase the proof? How is that sedition? So, look, the problem is that there's clear inconsistency and there is clear discrepancy in the way some of these things are being done. To my mind, I could be wrong, and I hope courts will decide, and I hope courts will in this country will weigh in favor of freedoms rather than in favor of censorship and allowing the government a free run in terms of controlling what you and I say online.
All right, Nikhil, thank you so much for answering all of those questions and clearing that up for us. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this a lot more, and I hope we can
Unfortunately, I think so too, Faye. But thanks for having me on.
And for everyone who wants to know more about topics like this, go check out Medianama. They do an excellent job. I refer to them very often. It's a great website, and you'll find a lot of your questions answered on Medianama. All right, Nikhil, thanks so much. Nice chatting with you.
Thanks, Faye.